Hello everyone, Pyro here, better known as Ryan in the local Magic community. I'm here to present my modern burn deck, which I piloted to the semi-finals of Pro Tour Qualifiers, Kanza Tarkir. The reason I'm playing modern burn is because I felt it had a lot of strong matchups against a lot of the top decks in the format, which included Affinity, Scape Shift, Birthing Pod, Blue-White Red Control, and Midrange. So without further ado, I am running 4 Goblin Guides, 4 Eidolon of Great Revel, a relatively new card and very powerful, 4 Hellspark Elemental, 4 Lava Spike, 4 Lightning Bolt, 4 Rift Bolt, 4 Skullcrack, 3 Searing Blaze, 2 Boros Charm, 4 Lightning Helix, and 2 Magma Jet.
Now I wanted to take this moment just to have a quick talk about what I ran and why I ran it. I'm running the 4 Goblin Guide in the deck just because it's a really good card. 1 cost, 2/2 with haste. Sometimes gives a land to your opponent, but it's not that bad in some circumstances. If you're on the play, your opponent can sometimes discard the extra card they draw, so it's not too bad. Also, being able to see what your opponent is about to draw next turn is always a big plus side and gives you things to play around in your next couple of turns. The 4 Eidolon of Great Revel is a pretty powerful card. Forces your opponent to deal with. It's really devastating against decks that don't have a lot of removal because they can't cast that many spells and they just keep on taking damage every time they do. You'd think that there would be a downside to running it in this deck, but usually if you're casting spells while it's on the field, your opponent is either not casting spells or he is casting spells and taking damage as well, and you can usually just race him with this on the field even though you're both taking damage. I added the Hellspark Elemental into the deck because it's just a very powerful card. 3/1 with haste. You'd have to sack it, but you can bring it back a second time with Unearth. There is only one way of efficiently removing a Hellspark Elemental, and that is Path to Exile. Otherwise, your opponent gets 2 for 1 if they want to deal with it twice in a row, and it's just good value in that sense. The 4 Skullcrack I'm running, obviously, is just Skullcrack, you have to have it. I'm not running the 4 Flames of Bloodhand just because I just don't like the card. A 3 cost that deals 4 damage and stops healing for the turn just didn't feel that good to me. It felt too greedy for what it was costed for, and I just chose not to run it. I didn't think I'd have to run it anyway, because against the decks that have a lot of life gain, I just lose to anyway, and I feel 1 Skullcrack was sufficient against a lot of the decks that I was expecting to verse. Now, moving on to the last 8 cards in the deck list. I wanted to really talk about these ones because they're a little bit unconventional in other burn decks. The 2 Boros Charm were better than I expected. It's 4 damage for 2 cost, which is but when it came to calculating math, and the opponents are trying to calculate if they're dead next turn or calculate plays, what's their outs and stuff, it managed to be really good in that sense. In the way that, he has 2 cards in hand, I'm going to get double bolted end of turn. No, he's going to take 7 because I have a Boros Charm in hand, and I'm going to top deck a Lightning Bolt, and it's going to be lethal. So he thinks he's safe on 10 life, but he really is not. So in that sense, it did actually help me in some games where people poorly calculated and didn't expect me to run a card like this. Moving on to the 4 Lightning Helix. Again, better than I expected. Being able to race better than a lot of the other decks. I have a better matchup against burn decks with this card, and I have a better matchup against Affinity, obviously, as well. Just helped so much more against the aggro decks. And yeah, I like the card. Very good in this deck. And the 2 Magma Jet, I wanted a little bit of Scry in the deck, but I didn't want to run 4, and I decided on 2, and 2 worked fine. Just being able to set up draws and, my opponent's going to be dead next turn, I know what's on top of my deck, GG. And yeah, it's really good.
Now the lands I chose for this deck are 4 Arid Mesa, 4 Scalding Tarn, 4 Sacred Foundry, and 8 mountains, and 1 stomping ground. Now the 1 stomping ground is in there for sideboard options. It's easy to fetch with the fetch lands, so let's move on to the sideboard. Now the sideboard I was running for this deck wasn't 100% complete. I was missing a couple of cards that I wanted to run, and it was a bit of a rush job, but nevertheless it did turn out not too bad, and here was what I came up with. I'm running 3 Dragon's Claw. The 3 Dragon's Claw are in there for Modern Burn. I thought Modern Burn would be a really big deck for this tournament, especially since there was a few Modern decks around at the local Modern tournaments, but that wasn't the case when it came to the Pro Tour, so yeah, didn't really sideboard them in that much at all. I also had a little bit of a plan with using them against Escape Shift, just be able to gain like a lot of life and get out of burn range, but even then you don't really need them. You can usually just keep on burning their face and just win anyway. The deck's pretty good by itself against Escape Shift, but this was a strategy I had in mind against it. I'm also running 2 Searing Blood. I wish I ran more in the sideboard, at least 1 more, because they really did turn out to be a really good card against any aggro deck, especially decks like Affinity, where it was just devastating against. Just being able to Searing Blaze them or Searing Blood them and get a 2-for-1. You know, deal damage to you, kill your creature, deal 3 damage, bolt you, you know, which is very good. Better than I expected. I'm also running 2 Leyline of Punishment. This card was against decks that had a lot of life gain, like Soul Sisters and the Hexproof Enchantment deck. Because those 2 decks, Burn just can't beat them. That's just simple as that. They gain too much life, things just get out of control, and it's hard to interact with those decks. So Leyline Punishment was my sideboard card against it, and I didn't verse any of those decks on the day, luckily. So, yeah. Also running 2 Ancient Grudge against Affinity, and for Tron as well. Just being able to Ancient Grudge their Wormcall Engine, Flashback, kill off their lifelinker, then you're fine, you're on your way. Completely deal with Wormcall in 1 card, if it became relevant, and yeah, against Affinity it was a really good card, just a 2-for-1 in itself, and even if your opponent gets a big god draw, this card can help you stabilize and win the match. I ran Rest in the Peace sideboard against Storm because it shuts off their Pyromancer's Ascension, and it also stops their Past in Flames, and it's just harder for them to go off. All you have to do is kill off Goblin Electromancer at a time where they can't cast anything to respond, and you can just win the match, like straight up. You don't have to have Rest in Peace to beat Storm, but it was just an insurance plan to make sure that nothing got out of control. And also it was a sideboard card against any other decks that use the graveyard, so any decks that really need the graveyard to win with their deck. I'm also running 1 Wear and Tear. I'm running the 1 Wear and Tear sideboard for against Affinity, obviously destroy artifact, and the enchantment, destroy like ley lines and stuff. I didn't run that much enchantment destruction in my sideboard. I had a Ray of Revelation in here, but I cut it last minute just for something else. The Pyroclasm was against decks that ran Geist of St. Traft, you know, like the blue, white, red decks, and against decks that had a lot of creatures like the tokens and stuff like that, just to be able to wipe the board. Because once they start building up, it's hard to stop them. The 1 Blood Moon was against decks like Tron, and any decks that had a lot of different coloured lands, and they were really greedy with their mana bases. I didn't end up sideboarding it at all. I didn't verse any decks that it was relevant against, so yeah. And the 1 Combust against blue out red decks, just be able to kill off Restoration Angel. So, yeah.
Thank you everyone for having a look at this video. I would like to thank the people that wanted to see the deck list that I created. Definitely gave me a bit more motivation to do this video. And yeah, like and subscribe if you'd want to see more, and I'll see you next time.